Again, I think that the evidence is so clear in tonight's debate. I want to close my speech by inviting you, if you're not already a Christian, to think about becoming a Christian. I wasn't raised in a Christian home or even a church-going family. But when someone shared with me the gospel of Christ as a 16-year-old, I began to read the New Testament. And as I did so, I was captivated by the person of Jesus of Nazareth. He had a wisdom about his teachings that I had never read before. He had an authenticity about his life that I had never seen in people who claimed to be his followers in the Christian churches that I had visited. And I couldn't throw him out. I couldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. And after a period of the most intense soul-searching, about 6 months of this, praying and seeking God, I came to experience a spiritual rebirth as I asked Christ into my life. And God, for the first time that night, became a living reality in my life, a reality that I've walked with now, day by day, year by year, for the last 30 years. Tonight, they're going to be giving away some New Testaments after this debate. I want to encourage you, if you haven't found Christ in that personal way, that you do what I did. Pick up a New Testament, begin to read it, and ask yourself, could this really be the truth? I believe it could change your life in the same way that it changed mine.
As we come to the final segment of my talk for tonight, I'd like to respond again to some of the points which I've already responded to several times before. It seems somehow that we are repeating ourselves, and in dialogue, we do need to listen to each other. Dr. Craig thinks I did not reply to his point about multiple appearances, but recall that I referred to a scholar, Raymond Brown, according to whom there was only one appearance to the 12 disciples. And according to Dr. Craig himself, Raymond Brown is one of the greatest New Testament scholars of our present time. So I'm quoting from a scholar of no mean reputation, and he has answered that point. Now, why would the disciples of Jesus have preached the resurrection? And I've said that what the disciples would have preached was that Jesus is alive. And that would accord with the plausible hypothesis that I've put forward. What about the vision versus appearances? Well, the disciples would have seen a vision of Jesus that is so strong and so different from what later people would report that the disciples were so filled with faith and they were ready to go about and preach that Jesus was alive again. They always had faith in Jesus, and now they had the additional confirmation that the Messiah is alive. What about his suffering on the cross? Why would God rescue him after a little bit of suffering? Well, I've already said that that's in fact better than rescuing him after a whole lot of suffering, if you feel that suffering is a problem. So I do not see that there is a point here. And finally, I maintain that God did not deceive the disciples because, according to Muslim commentators, God showed the disciples a vision of Jesus, and hence the disciples were not deceived. When they went about preaching that Jesus was alive, that was a true preaching and it was not a deception. Dr. Craig says that he maintained that Jesus said that he is the Son of God, and I did not respond to that. But folks, I think that I've responded more than once by saying, first of all, it is historically implausible that Jesus would have preached a faith which is radically different from the faith of Moses, for example. That Jesus lived within Jewish history, and he must have abided by the Jewish law. He could not have preached a faith which, according to Old Testament law, would make him out to be a blasphemer. It is just implausible. And theologically, I've shown not according to Muslim theology, but according to Christian theology, and more to the point, according to Christian apologetics, championed by Dr. Craig, Josh McDowell, Norman Geisler, and others. If we understand it properly, Jesus, on whom be peace, after making these claims, died the death of a blasphemer. And if he died the death of a blasphemer, I maintain that we have no good reasons for thinking that God would want to raise him from the dead. And yet, in order to maintain that God raised him from the dead, you can only assume it, you cannot prove it. And so, we are in a circular bit of reasoning there in order to prove that Jesus resurrected from the dead. We can only know that he was true if God raised him from the dead. And God would only raise him from the dead if he were true. But you tell me that he died as a blasphemer. In that case, why would God want to raise him from the dead, thus vindicating the claims of a blasphemer? That would be theologically just impossible. Not according to Muslim theology, but Christian theology. And so I think that apologetic fails rather badly. Dr. Craig says that it is historically known that Jesus, or that, the crucified victims used to get a spear thrust. But the Roman authorities had a number of things they could do to a crucified victim. They could spare him, or they could spare him the sparing. Recall that Pilate was sympathetic towards Jesus. He, in fact, did not want to crucify Jesus, but he was pressed into doing that. If Pilate could omit one of the usual tortures, why not? And possibly he did omit that. That is why it is not reported in the earliest of the 4 Gospels, and only in the last of the 4. Dr. Craig says that the crucified victim would have been died after a couple of minutes. Is that what you said, Dr. Craig? A couple of minutes? After hanging a couple of minutes, yeah. I was surprised, because actually what I read is quite different. John Russo and Rami Arav write, death was not always quick, and the victim might agonize for several days before dying. Josephus reports that, and so on, but several days before dying. I think that settles the matter for the time that I have. That's from Jesus and His World, a cultural and archaeological dictionary. So I think finally, folks, we have a choice between 2 Jesuses, the Jesus of the Quran and the Jesus of the Bible. In some sense, we can believe in them both, and we do. But in one sense, it is only the Jesus of the Quran that is really rationally commendable, and that is the one I commend to you tonight. Thank you.
Just before we move into our question period, I'd like to take about 2 minutes where you can complete the fulfillment or the filling out of your cards. For those of you who arrived once the debate began, I'll just review the first question. It was to give us an idea of where you stood prior to the debate, which view you felt there was the best arguments for, and where you personally stood. And now the rest of the comment card, number 2 and 3, and the remainder of the card, you can take about 1 minute or 1 minute and 30 seconds and fill out, and then we'll move into the question period. Now, question number 4 and 5, if you would like more information from either of the sources, or representatives from the Christian group or representatives from the Muslim group, that's available to you in question number 4 and 5. And if you do, leave your name, please, at the bottom of the card so that someone can actually arrange to meet with you in between classes sometime in the next week. And number 3 is just a very brief summary of your comments of the debate. Okay, when you are finished your card, you can either fold it in half and hello? You got it? Get some serious feedback there. Have I got power in this mic here? Okay, when you're finished your card, are you sure I'm getting power there?